if you think about what health is, to me, it's the ability to adapt to your environment. If you can adapt like to any certain signal or stimulus or whatever in your life, and your body can have a reaction to it and then return to homeostasis, that's health.
Welcome to the QBC podcast, where we explore exciting new paradigms that have a meaningful impact on our day-to-day lives. I'm your host, Meredith Oke. Let's keep the conversation going. Join us in our free community by visiting qbcpod.com. That's qbcpod.com. And let's see where the quantum superhighway takes us next. The old paradigm way of looking at health was to focus exclusively on diet and exercise. If you wanted to take control of your health, it was all about diet and exercise. Now, most people still operate out of that paradigm. Not you guys, but most people, not us, but most people, including most practitioners. The practitioners have expanded it a little bit to include supplements. And if they're on the allopathic side, then it's mostly focused on prescription, and they may not even look at the diet and exercise piece. And my guest today is going to sort of break down what that education looks like, how it impacts the way that your practitioners are looking at health, the benefits of it, the rigor of having a 4 to 6 year degree, and also what's missing, the reductionist way that traditional educational systems look at health and how we can move out of it. So we really dig into what the standard structure of a health credential looks like, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, how we can shift the conversation, how we can shift institutions if we can, and what we really need to be looking at when we look at health today. And it's not just diet and exercise. Of course, it is how our biology is interacting with our environment as a whole. So Dr. Hussey has some great insights on that as somebody who followed very closely all of the standard advice on how to be exceptionally healthy and ended up having a heart attack in his early 30s. So that put him on a totally different course, and he has now gone deep, deep, deep into quantum biology and biophysics and has a very in-depth understanding of heart health and health in general from this new paradigm, which he has come to understand by doing his own research, by taking extra certifications. And he is now a faculty member at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology. He's written 3 books, and he's an independent practitioner that is really, I think, at the forefront of doing what needs to be done, which is shifting the paradigm from the ground up, which is what all of you are doing, whether you are a practitioner or a health coach or a client of one of those people. Just by exploring, researching, applying new ways of thinking about biology, you are in fact making the change happen. We don't have to wait for the CDC or the NIH to put out a bulletin, but a lot of those lately. We can just do it, which is really what's so fun about being in the world. So enjoy this. It's a really important conversation, and I know that you will like it. I look forward to hearing your feedback and questions afterwards. And of course, don't forget to visit my friends at boncharge.com. Put QBC in the discount box at checkout. This is a great place to buy high quality blue blockers, night lights. We have so many of those little clip-on red lights around the house. We use them to read before bed. We use them as flashlights. We use them if we need to see in a room that doesn't have a red light in it at night. Got to go downstairs in the middle of the night or something like that. They're super handy. That's my top pick for this month is the little red night lights. And then of course there is also red light therapy devices. And speaking about making sure that our biology is in sync with our environment, I definitely recommend our new sponsor, which is the My Circadian app. You just go to the App Store on your device and put My Circadian, and there is an app in there that was designed for regular people who are not super techie and not super sciencey to be able to track light and dark cycles, the different UV windows, which translates to vitamin D, moon cycles, even luck. There's a lux meter in there. It does all kinds of really fun things. If you're a practitioner, you're definitely going to want this. The practitioner version allows you to put in the location of your client so you can see what is going on in their environment specifically and help them fine tune their their circadian habits to make sure they're synced up. It's super fun stuff. It's a super fun world. You guys, there's so much cool stuff happening, and I so appreciate you being here and contributing to it and supporting it. And you are amazing. Have fun with this convo. Stephen Hussey, welcome back to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. I think this 3 or 4 times. I forget, but it's always super fun.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. If people want like a deep dive into Stephen's story, I have, as I just said, at least 2 other, maybe 3 other interviews. In the archives, you can go to QBC Pod and put in Hussey, Hussey, and they'll all come up. I don't remember the episodes offhand. So I want to jump right in because today we're going to talk about the field of chiropractic. What's missing, what used to be there that's not there anymore, your thoughts on the whole thing. So we'll start off. You were a successful chiropractor. You'd been in practice for 9 years. You were really good at what you did. You were early 30s. And as one does, you had a full-on heart attack. And the trajectory changed from there. So let's start with that.
Yeah. Well, just you saying the trajectory changed from there, that's interesting because it's this thing that obviously most people would consider this bad thing, right, that happened to me. But it has kind of turned into one of the best things that's ever happened to me because of where it took me, where I went to try and figure out why it happened and the things that I found. And now it's what I'm known for. And now I'm coaching people through their heart disease or to heart health. That's what I do for a living now. I don't even practice chiropractic anymore. I stopped doing that 6 months ago because it's what I do full time. So yeah, definitely changed trajectory for me. And in a way, it's what I'm doing now is more rewarding to me than chiropractic ever was. And we'll probably get into that, and I'll get into that more as we get into it. But yeah, so obviously it changed the trajectory for me because at that moment in time, obviously I missed something, right? Something happened because I had always been interested in health my entire adult life. Ever since college, when I figured out that I could live my life in a certain way and have a direct impact on my health, which no doctor ever really told me, I was like, okay, I can take back control and take the reins on this. And so I'd always kind of eaten well as whole foods as I could, tried various diets, did paleo, did vegan, did low carb, did all these things and found what worked for me. Exercise, I was always athletic and played a lot of sports. So that was just kind of part of who I was, but it always kept me active, just wanting to play sports. So, and people think that that's what it takes to create health, right? You eat right and you exercise. That's what we're kind of been told forever. And formal education was no different. It was the same kind of messages there is that you eat right and exercise. That's what, like in undergrad, I learned my major was health and wellness promotion. And in that, if I wanted to go to chiropractic school, I had to take all these other science classes too, the biologies, the chemistries, all that stuff. But yeah, in health and wellness promotion, I remember, I had basic classes. It was basically everything had to do with movement and food, right? And that was it. There was no other talk of any other aspect of health, really. Like to get a bachelor's degree in health and wellness promotion, you learned about exercise and you learned about food. And that's great. Those are important parts of living healthy, right? But they're definitely not the full story. It's very incomplete. And so, yeah, even then in chiropractic school, I stayed active and ate well as I could. And in chiropractic school was when I was vegan for 2 years, which ended up not working well for me in the end for various reasons. But I'm thinking back to like what that education was like. And it was, so first of all, like just so people have this context, because we're going to talk a lot about chiropractic today. I didn't know this going to chiropractic school. Like I my parents took me to a chiropractor at a very young age, and they said that it helped me with my asthma. I have no memory of it helping, but they said that it helped me with that. I was able to get rid of asthma later in life by doing other lifestyle things. But then I didn't go to a chiropractor again and probably until college. I started going to one again and had no concept of this philosophy of chiropractic, the different, like the divide in chiropractic or anything like that. So when I'm applying to schools, no idea that there's different philosophies and different things in schools. We all have the same board exams. We have to pass the same board exams regardless of school you go to. But there's really had no idea that like the school that I ended up going to, which was University of Western States, considers themselves one of the most evidence-based schools. They're teaching based off the literature. which I appreciate that they taught me how to critique literature and read literature in ways like that. It helped get me a lot of places when I was reading literature about cardiovascular disease. But yeah, there's like that side of the spectrum, and there's some schools on that side. And on the other side, there's the very philosophy-based schools, which are very much like treat the spinal cord, treat the spine and the nervous system, and everything will work better. And there's kind of two different things. Whereas this side is very do what the research says, like treat pain and treat conditions based on what the research says is effective. And so it's very interesting. Whereas two different, and then there's a bunch of schools in the middle where they're varying degrees of either side of those extremes. So yeah, it was very interesting to have no concept of that going in. And then even then, like at my school, they were very big on, they wanted to make us as close to primary care physicians as we could. So what that means is basically someone could come in with literally anything. And it doesn't mean that I can treat that thing, but I can diagnose it or at least recognize it and refer them out to who they need to go to. So my school was very proud of treating us to be primary care physicians. And I've noticed.
So this was a chiropractic school, but they
Yes.
really seemed to have modeled themselves on as a medical school.
Yeah. And a lot of people would say that people who want to practice chiropractic, they're calling them medipractors. Is what they're calling them, because it's very much that way. And again, there's no problem with that. I'm not complaining about it. It's just the way that school's philosophy was to be very familiar with the research. What does chiropractic actually treat as far as these diagnosable conditions, right?
Okay.
Whereas a very medical philosophy, we have to find a diagnosis in order to treat something. Whereas if a not very non-medical philosophy would be like, regardless of what the symptoms are, because sometimes the collection of symptoms does not match up with your diagnosis or a diagnosis that you're trying to get it to fit, right? It doesn't match up. You still know what to do, right? Because you recognize the same imbalances in the body that literally cause when a body is telling you something is wrong, you recognize the imbalances that are causing that, and you can fix those, and the body figures it out, right? Rather than saying, I need to know exactly what's going on, have a diagnosis before I can do anything. So and I didn't get exposure to that more philosophical side of things until later, because I got this education that told me that this is the way to do things. And that's fine, but I've never been a person that's more like, hoorah, get involved in this thing because I like it and I want to be involved in this. And it's kind of a belief. It's whatever. It's always skeptical to me. Like, I've never been a very big proponent of, like, I believe in chiropractic, right? I think that it's great, right? But I've never been that way. I've never been like, yeah, I believe in this is the best thing to do. I love all chiropractic. It's all great. I've never been that kind of person. It doesn't mean that I don't like chiropractic. It just means that I'm not tribal, I would say.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're just not an all or nothing thinker.
Yeah.
Which is incredibly helpful, because I do see that a lot, whether it's on the professional side or even just the other side. Even with light, people are like, I'm going to watch the sunrise every morning and then that's it. I never have to do anything else again. All my problems are fixed. It's like, okay, that's not what we said.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So I came into things with that kind of mentality, just kind of like, whatever, I'm just learning stuff, having no idea. But then later, having worked with lots of different chiropractors who went to different schools, I'm starting to see, oh, there's a whole different way of doing this or practicing this. And then I learned that there's this huge divide in the profession, which is why chiropractic, or one of the reasons why chiropractic seems to not be able to get anywhere as far as like politically or legislatively, because when state or federal governments are getting legislation from chiropractic as far as what we can do, what we can't do, they're getting two pieces of legislation, one from the ICA and one from the ACA, who have different philosophies. And the legislators are like, well, what do you chiropractors want? We don't know what you want. So therefore, we're not going to do anything. And that's kind of a big issue.
One of them is the more medically evidence-based, everything we do comes from the literature. And the other one being the more philosophical based, like treat the person and see what happens.
Yeah, it seems to be that's the divide. Now, you couldn't go to a chiropractor, though, any chiropractor, and be like, so which one are you? Because it's all across the board. That's why you really have to go to a practitioner and see if they fit with you, right? And see if you like what they do and how they explain it and everything. Because, I mean, there's chiropractors that are full-blown functional medicine, and they're just taking blood work and recommending supplements, right? And that's all they do. They don't even do chiropractic. And then there's chiropractors who just adjust the spine, and that's pretty much all they do. Then there's chiropractors who do, all kinds of muscle work or physical therapy or whatever. Like, there's all kinds of things, and it varies depending on the state of what chiropractors can do. In some states, chiropractors can take blood work and interpret that, and others they can't, So it's crazy. Like in Oregon, where I went to school in Portland, chiropractors are technically, at least last time I checked, they're still allowed to deliver babies, do proctology exams and gynecological exams if you do extra training. You can't do that coming out of school. But under your license, if you do extra training and you get certified in those things, you can do them in that state. Whereas most other states, you cannot do those things whatsoever. There's even minor surgery, chiropractors can do that. And so going to school in Oregon, I had to learn all those things because in the state that I went to school, that was under my license. So I had to learn them. And to get my state license, I had to test on those. Whereas in lots of other states, you don't have to get your license. So just very interesting. It's very different.
This is actually very helpful because I always think that you're a doctor. And then I'm like, oh, no. And then I go check. I'm like, oh, no, he's a chiropractor. But the way you talk about things, which is how I know you, is talking to you. I'm like, you sound and speak like a doctor. Okay. So now I'm seeing why. Got it. Okay.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you say that and you notice that because I wouldn't know that. It's just my experience that I'm speaking from. So going through that, like I remember like in chiropractic school, everybody thinks that, first of all, the first 2 years of chiropractic school are just like medical school. Yeah, like a traditional medical school. And the reason I know that is because in Portland, where I went to school, they had the 4 big kind of medical discipline schools were in Portland. They had the OHSU, which is the medical school and dental school. They had University of Western States, the chiropractic school, the National College of Natural Medicine, which is naturopathic school, and then Oriental College of Medicine. So they're all there. So they had this group called SAME. I forget what it standed for, but it was basically students something. So we all got together to talk. People who wanted to come got together. So I got to know people.
That's really cool.
I was also dating somebody in the naturopathic program, or I did for a little while. So I got to know people in the naturopathic program. And then a friend of mine in chiropractic school, her boyfriend, who's now her husband, was at medical school. And then a friend of mine in chiropractic school, his best friend from college was in the dental program. So we all kind of got together and got to know each other and compared our curriculums. And the first 2 years was exactly the same. Like we were learning all the basic science, all the physiology, all the anatomy, all the pathology, everything was exactly the same. We were taking all the same courses. And then after that, it differed, right? After that, we started adjusting a lot more, looking at very neuromusculoskeletal type conditions. The medical school went pretty deep into pharma. The Natural College of Natural Medicine the naturopaths did lots of herbalism and lots of other therapies. They did all kinds of things. So it's very interesting to see things change as we were going through our education. But the reason I say that is because people are unfamiliar with the types of education, right? And so, but then when I got into later quarters, I'm learning things like nutrition. I had 2 or 3 nutrition classes in chiropractic school. People think that, oh yeah, chiropractors, they learn all these alternative ways to do things. And technically that's true. But when I think back on my nutrition courses, absolutely terrible. Based on what I know now, just terrible. No offense to the professor or the school or the curriculum or whatever, but it was basically just like nutrition meant to them supplements. That's what I was learning. I was learning, okay, we have this evidence for this supplement to do this, you can do that. And then like when I was going through clinic, like a student intern, I had to get certain nutrition credits. So I had to recommend nutrition to someone. That meant recommending a supplement to them. That was my nutrition credit.
Yeah. So it's like a prescription model, but with supplements instead of drugs.
Yeah. And unfortunately, so I guess I've always been curious. So like I was going through chiropractic school and got this education and felt like, that's not what I wanted to learn. It wasn't what I thought. There has to be something more, right? It can't just be you adjust the spine and give supplements. That can't be right. And it can't just be, it doesn't make sense to me to kind of think of it as a trying to diagnose somebody with something, right? Because there's chiropractors that just do sports medicine and all they do is treat athletic injuries and things like that. And so after chiropractic school, I was like, there has to be more. So then my school had just launched this human nutrition and functional medicine master's program. So I was like, okay, I'll go do that. Because it was like half online, half in school. So I did the in-classroom part. And then I went to Ireland while I finished the rest of it, because I went to Ireland after chiropractic school. And that didn't tell me what I thought I wanted to know. It just didn't. It was just unsatisfying to me. I mean, I learned a lot of things. It was good. Like we talked a lot more about actual nutrition in that program. We talked about things like oxidative stress and genetics, but there was a lot more supplements, right? And actually, to his credit, the guy who started that program, his name was Alex Vasquez, And he started the whole program, he built the whole program, and then the school wanted to sell out the Standard Process, which Standard Process is a good supplement company if you're into supplements, right? They wanted to take a bunch of money from Standard Process in order for them to recommend only Standard Process products in the program. And he was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sell out. So he left. And I was like, good on him. That's awesome.
Wow. Good.
So he left. But so anyways, that's kind of my formal education. It was that kind of story. But even after the functional medicine program, it was like, I'm unsatisfied. I don't know what causes disease. Nothing told me what causes disease. And that's what I was looking for.
So you had like this intuitive sense that the picture was incomplete.
Yeah.
And then you had a health event that kind of proved the picture was incomplete. Because if all of that had been sufficient, why would you be having a heart attack at 30 years old?
Right. Or so even then, like as a chiropractor, I learned about neuromusculoskeletal disorders and about the nervous system and things like that. But the way that I see that stuff now is totally different than what I think the traditional chiropractor would think, whether they're more medical based or more philosophical based. But yeah, it was clearly something that I missed, because even then I was eating well and exercising and all that stuff. And I did that after chiropractic school for 9 years. And then, had this cardiac event seemingly out of the blue. All my testing looked great. There was nothing that told people this was going to happen, and it still happened. So that got me more curious and looking into more things to try and figure out what that was. But it also got me really focused on heart disease. I mean, I was already somewhat focused on heart disease because I'm type 1 diabetic. And so that heavily predisposes me to heart disease technically. So I've always kind of thought about that. But this got me really thinking about it, obviously, figuring out why this happened. And that led me down this path of where I am now. So, yeah.
Knowing what you know now, when you look back at that curriculum, which I think by general standards was actually pretty good. I've heard, it could have been a lot worse. What was missing?
When you look at especially Western states and trying to be more of a medical side of things, like that education was the standard. Like if you go to any medical school anywhere, like OHSU in Oregon, like you're going to get that same education. It's just going to vary a little bit after when we go to treatments, like based on what you can treat. So yes, it was very good. And it's standardized across all chiropractic schools. So we all have to pass the same boards and get the same credits for things. So that was the case. Very, very high level of education. What was it missing? Why could I not prevent this? Right. Those are answers that I've had to come to through my own research. I always credit my dad for this. He gave me this curiosity, because he's always like, when we were growing up, he'd ask us just random questions. And even if we knew the answer, he'd be like, but why? And so we're just always having to tell him why about stuff. Or even like science projects in elementary school, like we'd do the project and be, this is what we got. And he's like, yeah, but why? And we have to think about that. So it gave me this curiosity. Fortunately, I had already been reading a lot about health in general. And it wasn't until after the heart attack that I really started getting into light, because I was aware of circadian rhythm and I was aware of sunlight being healthy and things like that. But the whole reason this started for me, which I don't often say on podcasts, was that I didn't know what I was doing right after the heart attack. And I've had this success and I've been able to figure out why I was successful and all this stuff. And that's great. But in the first, I didn't know what I was doing. They just scared me into thinking I was going to develop heart failure because I just had a heart attack, which is a big issue after you get damage to tissue in your heart, is you can develop heart failure. And the only thing I knew at that time was I was well aware of the research that showed that infrared sauna was phenomenal for heart failure. And I was like, infrared light, this is it. So I got a sauna and started doing that, and then just started researching more and more and more. So that's how I got onto light, was just that little bit of information right there. And then applying it to all these different things, like, well, that makes sense because the sun is always infrared light. Anytime it's up, there's 40% infrared light. And so I just started making sense of all these things, and then recognized, like, based on your question is what was missing, is that right there. What's missing is that we're looking at human physiology and biology from a biochemical perspective, from a structural and a biochemical perspective. So even then, I think about it like as I wrote this book on chronic pain. It's been out a couple of years now, and I'm thinking about that too. People think of pain as this very physical thing. Like thinking about a physical therapist or a chiropractor, we're thinking that we have to treat this tissue physically to get it to stop expressing pain. And that's not the case necessarily. I mean, a physical ailment can be one contributor to why someone would have a change in a tissue that would cause the brain to express a pain signal, but it's much more than that. There's more than just this physical aspect of something or the biochemical changes that happen due to the physical aspects of it. And so as I'm starting to learn all that stuff, I'm like, where was that in my education whatsoever? All we're learning about, I mean, I had to take organic chemistry and then biochemistry and all these courses in college and in chiropractic school because it was all based on that. It was just little letters that interact with each other and make different things. And it was very linear and it was very one step after the other. And even your labs, it was just trained you that that's the way physiology works, is that you just one reaction after the next. It's these biochemical interactions. That's what drives everything, even like nutrition and even supplements and pharmaceuticals. They're all based off of how can we change the biochemistry, right? We're looking at nutrition. We're reducing it down to the nutrients in the food or in the supplement or whatever that have the biochemical reaction to change this. And so that's where, I mean, you're just trained that that's the way that it is. Right. And then from a physical perspective, all you're doing is you're looking from the outside, like, I got a shoulder problem. Okay, there's something wrong in the shoulder. You're not really connecting that. And in chiropractic, there's a little bit more of this where you're connecting it to the nervous system and how it's signaling to the shoulder and things like that. But I've come across other techniques and philosophies of things that make way more sense from a physical perspective and how it is about the nervous system. But I think about it way differently than how chiropractic thinks about the nervous system. So there was just all this stuff missing. And to some extent, it's understandable that it's missing, because if you're going to bring people in and give them an education for 4 years, like, you've got to make it this and you got to give them that. That's what you're paying for, right? If you try to teach somebody all the things that I've learned since then in a 4-year program, that's impossible. You're not going to do that or be able to very successfully. It's definitely hard to standardize it too, which that's the thing, is you have to standardize.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
We're
you
trying.
would know that, wouldn't you? Yeah, you would know that.
There's a lot of moving parts.
So it's like that's what's missing is philosophy of health. Because if you think about what health is, to me, it's the ability to adapt to your environment. If you can adapt like to any certain signal or stimulus or whatever in your life, and your body can have a reaction to it and then return to homeostasis, that's health, right? So if we think about it from that perspective, we can't just think about the biochemical interactions or the physical things that happen to us. We have to think about every single environmental stimuli that our bodies come into contact with day in and day out. And now you're thinking, oh, well, that could be light, it could be sound, it could be relationships, it could be toxins, it could be movement, it could be food, it could be whatever, EMF, it could be all these things. All these things are just signals to our body that are telling it to do one thing or the other, which is a very important concept, especially when I talk about how I do chiropractic now. It'll come back, but we have to look at all of it. And most educations, medical, chiropractic, maybe even naturopathic, they may be a bit more broad, but are looking at it from a very, very biochemical perspective and physical tissue perspective, because that's how you can standardize something. That's how you can make it an education and make it 4 years, make it reasonable, that kind of thing. But it's missing, and it's so incomplete that any sort of formal education on some sort of professional healthcare practice is incomplete. And it's why coming out of school today, I think students are just incredibly ill-equipped to handle what we're seeing, because their education's been so reductionist into what is contributing to all this disease.
And reductionist is the right word, because it's not that it's incorrect. It's just like one layer. But if everything is reduced to that one layer, then any part of health or symptom or condition or experience that a person is having that is coming from the other layers is not going to be addressed.
And I'm critical of functional medicine because I have a master's degree in it, but I'm critical because I've had clients and people over the years, patients as a chiropractor, that come to me and say, yeah, I went to a functional medicine practitioner and, I'm taking 15 supplements a day. And there's a few issues with that. One is that that's incredibly expensive for someone to do. But two is that it's the same philosophy as Western medicine. You take blood work and you treat the blood work with supplements rather than treat the blood work with medications. It's not health. You're not going to create health by that. And the reason I know that is because And, functional medicine does address environment. They do address lifestyle. And so I'll give them that. But if you think that 15 supplements is more important than the environment, then you're not doing a service to somebody, right? Because you could take all the supplements in the world. You could take a medication. You could go to a clinic and have a treatment, right? But if you come back from doing those things, or you do those things in the environment that's giving you the signals to tell your body to be sick, they're not going to help, right? And so now the person is just doing these things thinking that it's helping while not addressing the actual things that are telling the body to be sick, which means their light environment or their lack of movement or their EMF or their whatever else it be, their dental infections, whatever it could be. There could be so many different things. It's incredibly lacking. And again, at some point it's understandable because it's really hard. How do you get all that information into one education and give people a piece of paper that says they can do something now? That's really what education is.
Yeah.
A piece of paper.
Yeah. And truly, as we were just talking about, there are some basic ways you can be equipped, but then it needs to be an ongoing process. And I also think that if the paradigm shifted a little, right? And that's why I really, God bless the scientists who invented the term quantum biology, because to me that gives, instead of just, one section of the library, it's like the whole library, all the books on all the different things that you've just mentioned have a place on the shelf if you expand from a biochemical view to a quantum view, and mechanisms of action to go with it, which is always what they're after, right?
Well, I think that you said mechanisms of action, and that just put this whole thought into my head, because I think that the most important thing that looking at things from a quantum perspective has given me is that we will not ever be smarter than nature, ever, right? And so if we think we can be, if we think we can master the next biochemical pathway, which again is what medicine is trying to do. I used to work in a clinic as a chiropractor across the street from the Virginia Tech School of Medicine and Research. And I would get all these PhD students coming in. I'd always ask them, what are you working on? And they'd tell me, oh, I'm working on this very specific biochemical pathway to see if I can create some molecule to change that, because it's all, where's the next pharmaceutical, right? Where can we make something? And again, very reductionist, but they're trying to change this one biochemical pathway and think they're going to affect a whole disease process that has all these complex mechanisms or within a complex biological ecosystem. So when you look at things from a quantum perspective and you realize that something can happen and that 100 different things can happen all at the same time, and how that makes it almost impossible to predict what's going to happen, you just have to throw your hands up and be like, why am I even trying to research this biochemical pathway? Because that doesn't even make sense, that I'll never be able to figure it out. And yeah, I've heard mathematicians talk about it, and you get two things, you can kind of predict how they're going to interact with each other. You get three, it becomes harder. You get four, you get five, it's almost impossible now. And we're talking about hundreds of reactions at the same time. So when you think about it that way, to me, and I've expressed this to clients recently a lot, which is probably why it popped into my head. It's almost as if we're creating this false idol that is medicine, that is science, right? And that this is the standard by which we're trying to do things. And those things are trying to basically tell us, or using those things, we're trying to tell ourselves that we're smarter than nature, or smarter than God, or smarter than the universe, or whatever you want to say, right? When in reality, what quantum, I think, biology teaches us, when you see that from that perspective, is that at some point you have to kind of throw up your hands and surrender to the higher power that is what I would consider nature, right? And if you put yourself in that environment, your physiology knows what to do, and you're never going to understand how it's doing it or why it's doing it, but you will see the result. And so it's not about me trying to do this science or diagnose this thing that I think that I can control the way the body's doing something, or give this pill or give this whatever. It's about throwing your hands up and saying, go back to this environment and make that be your baseline, right? And if your baseline is that, then that's a great place to start, right? Now you've created this as much as you can within the confines of your modern world. Go back to nature, recreate nature. And that means that sometimes, yes, we have to use some modern day things that help us recreate that, because we all just can't go live in the woods. And then you can use some select maybe supplements or maybe this here and there, but your baseline has to be just throwing your hands up and going back to this and surrendering to that, because that's the only really way that your physiology is going to get the right signals. And what it does with that is up to the body, but we have to at least give it that chance. And that's almost like, people ask me all the time, like, how do you know you're not going to have another heart attack? And I'm like, That's why, because I just kind of gave up and said, I'll give myself to this higher power that is the philosophy that I have. And yeah, I could tell you all these different things in science about why I think that works, but in reality, I don't need to understand that. I just kind of like to because I'm curious. But yeah, I hope that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And I think going back to what you were saying, how you were trained on diet and exercise, for women my age, we grew up on that. The adults when we were teenagers, the adults in our lives getting middle-aged, wanting to get healthy, diet and exercise.
Yeah.
And so they see me doing all this stuff and talking about all this stuff, and they're kind of like, what are you doing? And I'm like, everything in our environment is affecting us. And our environment has changed a lot since we were teenagers. So yeah, it's exactly what you're saying. And what I feel like quantum biology does, and I'd love for you to give a little of the science on this, is like give that grounding to a little bit like for your dad, right? Okay, but why? It's like, what do you mean? Who cares? Like, it's fine. It seems fine. When in reality, we could be like, we're putting ourselves in a, destruction chamber every day and not even realizing it.
Yeah. So like from a perspective of say like some research article, let's take that. Right? We take this research article, we look at it. What's the goal of a research article? What are they trying to do? They're trying to show that this causes this. And you can start out with an associational study to just see if something's associated, but that doesn't really tell you much. You have to figure out why it's associated. And then the standard, like the higher standard is randomized controlled trials. And then higher than that is the systematic reviews of all the randomized controlled trials. But the controlled trial is the highest thing because like you take this intervention versus the people who don't do the intervention and you see if it causes something. And so it's like, okay, that's great. You tried to isolate all the variables and see if this one thing that they did versus the people who didn't do it caused a certain thing. It's like, that's great. However, last time I checked, I'm not exposed to one thing at a time.
Yes.
Nobody is. And at the end of the day, the way that we're doing research, even the standard of care, randomized controlled trial, is fundamentally flawed.
Yeah.
Because it can never tell us anything. It can tell us what this study showed, but that's about it. That doesn't apply to any of us because we are all in different environments. We've all had different experiences, different traumas, different whatever. And so you can't really say that you can't apply that to everybody. And we're all exposed to multiple things at multiple times all the time. And even then, you could say that in that randomized controlled trial, the results are completely void because everybody in that trial had different environments, did different things.
You didn't control for light. You didn't control for EMF. You didn't control for childhood. You didn't control for car accidents.
And you can't. Like it's literally impossible to control for all that stuff. So that's what I mean by putting this faith in this thing that literally can't give us what we think that it's going to give us. And we have to put our faith somewhere else. So from that perspective, without that philosophy for me of nature, and again, people could call it God, they call it prana, they can call it universe, they can call it ether, whatever they want to call it. For me, it's nature. Without that context, then you can't interpret what that study said or what it meant, right? Then you just basically focused on the result of that study. And you say, see, this study lowered LDL with a statin and it created less heart disease. And aside from all the statistical manipulation that probably happened in that study, like you're taking that result as the end all, because this is the standard. This is a man-made standard that has been created, just like a man-made standard of care has been created through medicine. And that is us trying to think we're smarter than nature. So again, I mean, you read my book, there's like 750 cited articles of science in there. So it's not like I'm anti-science. I just am expressing the limitations of it and being aware of those and realizing that if I don't have this foundation of what nature is, then this doesn't make sense. So here's an example. So if you look at research on electromagnetic fields, right? Wireless signals, radio frequency, or electromagnetic fields, and you look at, say you read Andrew Marino and you read Robert Becker, you're like, this is some things. There's some things here that we should probably pay attention to. But there's also a lot of other studies that say that it's not an issue, right? They don't get any results. They didn't get any like harmful. You could argue that they designed those studies poorly or that there's other variables, and you could make all those arguments. But all that stuff without the context of nature doesn't make sense. And here's why. Because if you look at what nature provides us with a radio frequency on the electromagnetic spectrum of UV through infrared, right, from the sun. And that's it. Anything outside of that is non-native to us. And so for me, if for historically or evolutionarily, if all we had was these wavelengths between here and here, and anything outside of that, that's suspect until proven innocent, right? And whenever you read Arthur Furstenberg's book about how they were studying, like electricity came and then all the radio frequencies came after that. And the things that they saw, those are just observations, but it's a 200-year observation that every
Right.
time that something happened, we saw these issues, right?
So just to clarify, so that is like electricity came and then there were some major
Right.
epidemics, illness.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, the early scientists who were studying electricity and kind of like inventing this thing got sick. They had flu-like viral-like illness, right? And then yes, every time we had this major jump in some sort of electromagnetic or radio frequency thing, we saw these epidemics. We saw these people get sick, whether that was after World War One, where we all know that, what was it, the Spanish flu? Was that what it was? I
So
forget what it was.
after all of the radio.
Yeah, after the radio towers, because radio frequency is what came out in World War One. That's how they communicated. And then radar in World War Two, and like there's all these different things. But he tracks it very well. And again, it's just associations.
I'll say it so you don't have to. 5G in the late 20 teens.
Yeah, I mean that's the latest one.
Did we have an epidemic of a flu-like virus after that?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And he traces that really well. And again, it's just associations, but it's a very consistent association every single time for the last 200 years. So it's kind of hard to ignore that, whether we know the mechanisms or not. So, but anyways, getting back to so nature also provides us an electromagnetic field, and that is the Schumann resonance of the earth, or the electromagnetic field coming from other living things. Those are compatible electromagnetic fields. Anything outside of that is non-compatible, which means the electromagnetic field is created by this artificial thing we've created, which is electricity, right? When we do that and we put it at a much higher voltage than, say, what's coming from the earth, when we touch our feet to the earth, that creates this field that's non-compatible with us. And so again, that's guilty and proven innocent until proven innocent in my mind, because it's not something that we have been exposed to historically for forever, really. And so that's just one example. So if you look at this research and you say, see, this research shows that it doesn't cause harm, or see, this research says that it does, you're tied to those things and you don't know what to make of those things because there's conflicting results there. Whereas if you have this foundation that is nature, you realize, oh, that stuff's not natural to us, right? And so therefore, it's, for me, just as my personal decision, I'm more likely to say, yes, it's probably the study that shows that there's harm. And then there's all the other issues with research too, as far as who's funding it, were the scientists paid off, all the stuff. Did they mess with the statistics to make it show a certain thing, which we can talk about all like that with statins and everything. But to give examples, there's this, again, I'd say like almost false idol in modern medicine and modern science. And it's taking us away, which is a very, I'd say, I don't know, like spiritual or religious kind of foundation. Like you surrender yourself up to a higher power. And that's how you find enlightenment and those types of things. So it's kind of led me to that. And that's just, one example. We could talk about light as well. The only light that we get is UV through infrared. So these other unnatural forms of light, it's not surprising that we're finding that they're harmful. And people will say like, why? Because we can adapt, right? And to a certain extent, we can adapt to things. But true adaptation, I think from an evolutionary perspective, true adaptation comes many, many generations. So in my first book, I talk about this Russian scientist named Dmitry Belyaev, who basically started selectively breeding foxes for docile traits. And after about 30 generations, he had pretty much foxes who were dogs. They were like he domesticated them. After 30 generations, basically, he started seeing characteristic changes. Like the fact that their ears were up like this all the time in nature, always perceiving their environment, they didn't have to anymore. Their ears started to droop. Like is what we see in dogs, right? And their coats started to change because they didn't need camouflage as much. And then after 50 generations, he actually died, but people continued his work. After 50 generations, he pretty much had these foxes that were like dogs. They were completely domesticated. And so that shows us that it takes, 30 to 50 generations to get significant changes in adaptation. And that's with very select breeding. So in nature, it doesn't happen that way. It probably takes longer. And for humans who have a much longer reproductive cycle, it probably takes longer to get these true adaptations to a change like that. And so if you think about how long that takes, and you think in the last 3 generations at the most, 4 generations at the most, the drastic amount of changes we've seen, there's no way our physiology could adapt to that. And so it's not like it's adapting enough to just kill us off immediately, but it's definitely enough to make us ill. And we're seeing the repercussions of that with a chronic disease epidemic. That's what I mean by like when we change the environment too much, these things are unnatural to us. Our bodies give us signals. This is not okay. And we're interpreting, like, the historical way to think about it has been, like, from a medical perspective is, oh, our genes are causing disease, right? And that's not the case at all. Our genes respond to the environment, if even that's the way it works. I don't even know from a quantum perspective. I'm not even sure if that's the way it works. But yeah, it's all about the environmental signals and how our body perceives them and then chooses to respond to them to keep us alive and adapt. If we're constantly trying to adapt, that's what we call disease. Like, we're constantly trying to adapt to an apparent signal. That's what we call disease. You give it a better signal, it's adapting to that. It's easier to adapt to that. We have health. We have homeostasis.
Our technological evolution so far outpaces our biology's ability to keep up, but also our institution's ability to keep up. You know, going back to your curriculum that focused on diet and exercise, that had its roots at a time where that might have been enough because we didn't have LED light bulbs. We didn't have screens in our faces
Mm-hmm.
before we fell asleep at night. We didn't have TVs on in the bedroom all night. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have 5G. We didn't have headlights on cars that could blind you when they come around the corner. Like, none of those things existed. And we are proceeding, or the institutional education system is proceeding as though none of those things are having a biological impact. Meanwhile, the research to show that it is, like, piling up. People always assume that, like, oh, you're kind of out on the fringe talking about these things because the research must be out on the fringe. No, it's all there. It's just we're not equipped. We have no mechanisms or structures that are equipped to update themselves quickly enough to connect that research to the people giving health advice, to the people receiving health advice, down to like the mainstream understanding of, you know, maybe turn those LEDs off in the middle when it's the middle of the night. Like, that should just be common knowledge, and it's not, because of all of these layers that are unable to keep up with the absolute insane pace of technology.
Change, and not just technology, but all kinds of stuff that we've seen over the last, I'd say, 150 to 200 years, major changes. But yes, even the last 50 has been crazy as far as technology. But yeah, and there was that study, I can't remember, I think it was 2011 when it came out, that was just basically, it found that the average amount of time for something to get published in the literature to be something that your doctor may tell you in the doctor's office was 17 years. And that was the average. So yeah, like, all this literature is there. And I talk about that all the time when I talk about cardiovascular disease. It's like the amount of things that I found in the literature that I have never met a cardiologist who's aware of astounds me. You know, because like, the work of Giorgio Baraldi itself just throws cardiology on its head, but it was completely ignored. I've never met, even more in the know cardiologists, I've never met anybody who's aware of him in the field of cardiology. It doesn't mean there's not somebody, because I don't know all of them. It's crazy to me that his work is not recognized, but of course it's not, because if his work was recognized, they would never do elective stents and bypasses, but they do. So yeah, it's just, there's so much incongruency between what medicine's actually doing and what the research is showing, because of A, the philosophy of medicine, and B, how fast things are changing. There's just, like, it's crazy. Like, a medical school would have to, revamp its whole curriculum to teach what's actually causing modern disease, even if that was their purpose, like, to try and actually prevent disease rather than just treat it and profit off of the treatment of it. But yeah, it's too much. But it's a good segue based on what you said, was that, like, even the modern day practitioner now is up against so many different things that even 20, 50 years ago, they wouldn't have had to address or be aware of, right? Because there's so many new things. And like, if you look at some of the early things that, like the early chiropractors, like D.D. Palmer and the people that worked with him were doing, and the results that they say they were getting, if you looked at that now and saw A, what they were doing, and B, the results they were getting, you'd be like, this is crazy. There's no way they could do that. But it's because of what they were doing. But also, in 1895, there wasn't near as many of the problems and changes that we've had today. So it's Interesting to think
Right.
about, how that was possible then. Even if it seems impossible today, it was very possible then.
Right. You could, with an adjustment, probably change somebody's life because that was probably the main thing going on. They didn't have all of these other assaults on their body.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what
And
was
then,
so what was the early chiropractic? Like, what did they do?
so I have a good friend, he's a chiropractor, who introduced me to a lot of this stuff. So especially in my program, it was very much like I told you, very medicine based. Look at the research. What has chiropractic shown to be helpful with? And we teach that. Whereas the philosophical schools, I didn't get much of that. And so they got more of this background of the philosophy of chiropractic and what D.D. Palmer did. But first of all, D.D. Palmer didn't invent an adjustment. People have been manipulating people for however many years. Ancient civilizations were doing that. He just kind of formalized it into what's chiropractic, right? Not even he did, his son did. BJ Palmer is the one who really formalized it into a career of chiropractic or a profession. Anyways, yeah. So if you look at like some of the early quotes of the Palmers, they'll say things like, all you really need is a space and a patient and the magnetic manipulator, is what he called himself. And he wasn't using
Really?
he wasn't like putting magnets. Some people do that today. They use magnets for
Mhm.
things. He wasn't doing that. He's using his hands, and he called himself the magnetic manipulator. And so I think that he had this concept of what chiropractic was that I don't even think maybe he didn't, or his early disciples didn't, or his students, but I don't even think that the philosophical schools have a true concept of what was going on and what he was doing. Because when I think about it and when I learned about it from a quantum perspective or quantum aspects of what the body does, it makes more sense to me on what he was doing and the results that he was seeing and what chiropractors can still see today. It's much less common, but can see today. If you ask chiropractors, I've lectured to groups of chiropractors and asked them these things. Like we all see people that come in and they're in a lot of pain, or they have all these health issues, or they're just like a disgruntled person. They don't even want to be there, and like their wife made them come or something like that. And then we start treating them, and whether their pain goes away or not, they just seem more likable. They seem more amiable about life. And we're just kind of like, okay, that's great. And we assume, oh, they must be feeling better. That's why they're happier or whatever. But when I thought about things differently and I thought about what D. Palmer was saying originally, it is magnetic manipulation. And then I learned things from a quantum perspective. I put a lot together. And so what I think was happening in those early days is that when you adjust the spine, which is the main treatment that most chiropractors do, you do an HVLA, a spinal manipulation of joints or whatever, you're creating sound. Obviously, we hear sound, but you're also creating electromagnetic field. You're having a piezoelectric effect that creates electrons, a streaming potential of electrons that goes somewhere. You're creating light. You're actually emitting. There's studies that show that when you adjust the spine, more biophoton emission happens in that area. And so you're doing all these quantum-like things to it. And then if you understand that the fascia is a communication system for all this stuff, and you adjust the spine and the communication system picks up on all that, and it's instantly relayed to the entire body. And you recognize that the better the fascia communicates, the more coherent the body is. It's one contributor to coherence of the body, which is how synced up and on the same page all the systems of the body are, all the cells, all the tissues, everything is. And when you do that, you're creating the signals that are creating coherence, right? You're improving. You're also breaking up scar tissue, because scar tissue is a place where the signal through the fascia can't flow very well. So if there's any around the spinal cord, you're breaking that up in the spinal cord and the spinal column. And so when all that stuff's happening, you start to understand that what you're really doing is you're creating coherence in a system. And so back in the day, it could be that you get a couple adjustments and you created coherence. Now there's all these things that we're exposed to today, and it's taking a lot more, or we're not seeing the same result, right? Or there's things like you adjust somebody, they go back right into the environment that was making them sick and creating incoherence, and it's like it's not going to matter. Whereas back in 1895, they were barely having electricity, right? So it wasn't even like this situation where you were surrounded by EMF, and now we are. So there's all this stuff. And so, yeah, so then when you realize that the heart is what's measuring, it's sending out the electromagnetic field, and it's measuring the coherence of the body internally and externally, what's happening on externally. And you start to increase the coherence internally by chiropractic or any other bodywork therapy. I'm not saying chiropractic is the only one. There's lots of different bodywork therapies that will increase this. And you start to see the effects of chiropractic or any bodywork therapy on heart rate variability, which heart rate variability, people think it's measuring balance in the nervous system, when in reality, it's measuring coherence. And it picks up on coherence and sends that message to the brain, sends that message back down through the body as nervous system balance. And so, yeah, it looks like, because chiropractors are all like, oh yeah, adjust the spine, you create nervous system balance. We're balancing sympathetic and parasympathetic, but that's only through creating coherence. And so that's what's actually happening in chiropractic. That's why we see the results. And you can relate heart rate variability to pretty much any chronic disease. If heart rate variability gets better, there's less rates of cancer. There's better cardiovascular outcomes. There's better neurodegeneration outcomes. There's metabolic outcomes. It's all of it, right? Because we're creating coherence. And that's the thing that chiropractic is actually doing. Because, traditional chiropractic philosophy will say, oh, you adjust the spine, you relieve pressure on the nerve, the brain is able to send a signal down to the body better. And that may be happening too, right? But in reality, what's really happening is the other way around. Is you're creating coherence, and the heart's picking up on that. The heart's sending that information to the brain. The brain is sending the signal back down of more coherence, more balance in the nervous system. So that's what's really going on. And I think that's what they were seeing in early chiropractic, whether or not they knew that or not. But now, chiropractic has this very interesting history of being like, chiropractors went to jail because they were accused of practicing medicine without a license when they were just practicing chiropractic. The American Medical Association, literally, there were statements out for them that medical doctors should accuse chiropractors of practicing medicine so that they would get arrested. It's crazy. And then I can't remember what year it was. I think it was the 60s. I can't remember, but eventually it went to a court, and the court, I think it was a superior court somewhere, like literally told the American Medical Association to cease and desist, that what they were doing was unconstitutional. You cannot do this. And it finally had stopped at that point. And I think that over time, depending on which school or which person you're talking to stay relevant, chiropractic had to become more medical to a sense, which is, that's kind of the name of the game, is you have to create this standardized education. It has to be evidence-based. You have to do all this stuff. Even though we talked about the evidence and how I think that's false idol, that's the standard by which you have to be relevant or create relevance to survive as a profession. And so now we get today these chiropractors that are thinking very neuromusculoskeletal rather than very quantumly, which is where I think it started, whether they understood that or not. And that's why they were seeing the results they were seeing, especially in 1895, without all the other stuff around them. So, yeah, I hope I described that well. But yeah, that's my perspective on what chiropractic was and is now.
It's so fascinating. And I think, like, for me, the thing that is hard to get my head around, and I know this for a lot of people too, is the idea that all of the structures that we believed had our best intentions at heart, and all of the structures that we put our faith in to keep us healthy or help us get back to being healthy if we get sick, are flawed. I'll say flawed. And I think over time, even totally disincentivized for us to be healthy, which leaves us in this space of, you have now started your own independent practice where you can treat patients with all of the knowledge that you've collected as a curious researcher. And it also, I think, is tough for people to swallow because it does put a lot of personal responsibility, right? If my environment matters that much, I have to think about it. I have to make the changes. And I'm going against the tidal wave of culture, which is hard to do, right? Like, I use the example of having a home birth. I lived in Ontario, Canada. There was like a midwife was covered by insurance. I learned with my first child that you had to get on the list like the moment you conceived or the midwives were booked out. So by the second one, I figured it out. I was in a culture that supported that. With my third child, I wasn't. And I was living overseas, and it was, I realized like I actually don't have the energy to go counter to what everyone wants me to do in this situation. So I went back to the hospital, and I just use that as an example because what I'm hearing from you is that like we do have to take this responsibility for environment, and it's not straightforward, and it's not what everyone else is doing. And so to have a practitioner or a coach or somebody at least who is supporting you in those choices becomes so important and is helping you to be that detective.
Yeah. I mean, an analogy I use with people, because I'll get on with a potential client and I'll be like, how do I know this is going to work? Can you guarantee me results? And I say, okay, so whether or not you went to college, when you go to college, does that guarantee you an education? They're like, well, yeah, if you pay for it and you go through anything. I'm like, yeah, but did you learn anything going through that? What determines if you learn something and how much you get out of this? So you can pay the same amount as everybody else, but your education can be very different. Whether or not it works and gets you where you want to go is very, very different based on how much you put into it. Right. So it's really on you. Even if you're all paying the same tuition, paying the same amount, you get out of it what you put into it. And that means you really have to invest. You can't just pay and expect someone to give you the answer or fix you. And that's a very hard thing to face. And I've especially become aware of how hard that is for certain people with trauma, because you have to face some very, very hard things. And that's not easy. And my heart goes out to them and I empathize with them. I can also be there to encourage them that it's worth it. So it's not just environment as far as having to change things, and you may lose some friends if you decide that this is going to be my hard line. I'm going to change this and I'm not going to do that. This friend may be like, oh, I don't want to hang out with you anymore. Like, okay, you have to kind of be okay with that, right? But it's also making you look at internal things that may be in the way of you getting to the place where you want to be, which is difficult. And those are things that I've had to learn over time, and working with people, that's something that's probably one of the most important things to deal with. So you're right, it's not easy, and it's not easy. Sometimes it depends, because half of that's really empowering. It's like, oh man, now I can make the changes. I'm in control. I don't have to rely on the next blood test or this medication or what this doctor says. Or I can take back control. It's very empowering, but it's also like, man, now I've got this climb to face, right? I got all these things I got to change about my environment. I got to deal with things internally, all this stuff, and there's so many resources out there for people to utilize and help them. So it all depends on how you see it, right? Do you see it as, man, I'm back in control, or do you see it as, this is way too much. I can't do it.
Yes. And I love that you said that because ultimately it's a gift. If it was just in the hands of somebody at the top of the food chain in a higher in the hospital structure, like that it's locked away. Like I don't have that person in my living room. I don't have that person in the, when I wake up in the morning. But if it's me,
Mhm.
like the world becomes just infinite possibility. And I've embraced that, going through some deep challenges, 20 years ago. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm just going to take 100% responsibility for everything. And people are like, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. I'm like, I'm not. I'm
Mhm.
choosing the freedom. I'm
Mhm.
choosing the freedom path. Because if I could take responsibility, then I get to make the changes and make the choices.
Yeah.
And, if they don't work out, I'd make a choice again, not to get mad at myself and blame myself. But that's a choice too.
Yeah, and it's about, I mean, it's the same thing as like, how long do you stay stuck in a situation because you're waiting on someone else, or you're waiting on some information or something like that? When a long time ago, you could have decided, I'm going to do this because I'm in control, and get wherever you need from that, having that mentality. And then there you go. Doesn't mean it's going to be all like sky high from there. There'll be ups and downs. But
Yeah.
if you're the one in control making the decisions and you have the information that allows you to make the decisions, that's the most important aspect of it. And so there's something that's completely missing from medicine and from formal education. Is It's more like the mentality, I feel like, especially of medical education, is this is the standard of care. Do this to people, right?
Right.
Rather than this is what we think we understand. This is the best way we think about it. Educate people on this and allow them to make their own decisions. That's a much different way of
Yeah.
doing anything medical or anything health related. And so I didn't know that's what was going to happen for me. But, I thought that I was going to come into this starting my own business and coaching people and teach people about heart disease and help them with their heart disease. But then I realized what I was doing was I was empowering them. I was educating them so they can make their own decisions. And that's what gives them the peace of mind. So that mentality, that whole philosophy is incredibly missing from any formal, I think, education.
And it's this beautiful paradox of I'm in control and I'm surrendered.
Yeah.
I don't know how those two things are true at the same time, but they
Well,
are.
if you're in control, it's your choice to surrender.
There you go. Oh, Stephen, this has been so delightful. I can keep doing it. And I'm so excited that you are faculty at the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, where we are doing our best to put some curriculum around all of these concepts
Mm-hmm.
and provide that educational structure so that this missing piece can be slotted into whatever it is that whatever field of expertise a person comes to the table with. This is like a lens to go over top, not a replacement, just a widening and an expansion of the view of health that can be taken. And we talked a lot about research today. And, as I mentioned to you, that's the next phase is we're going to be rolling out programs so that the practitioners can be pulling research from the field, from those real life individual and bio-individual interactions, so that we aren't completely reliant on lab data and randomized control studies that control for all of the things that actually happen in people's lives.
Yeah.
There's
a really interesting article out there that is published that I've cited in a few of my books. Maybe you're aware of it, but it argues against evidence-based medicine and argues for medicine-based evidence. So basically,
perfect.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yes.
Yeah. Because it would be more useful if we had this huge database of people came with this condition or this symptom, right? And this is what we tried. This is what happened, right? If we had a huge catalog of that, rather than let's try and prove this is a good treatment for something, and we can't do it until we prove that it is. And that's evidence-based medicine.
Let's try and make this one sequence of events, this one sequence of cause and effect, the standard of care for everyone when we live in a quantum universe that has infinite variables at any given moment.
Yeah. It's just like my reversal of the plaque in my leg and how I was able to do that. I just finished writing up the case report for that. We're trying to get that published. But that case report, like if you had 50 case reports, like that's data, right? Even though they're case reports and they're the lowest form of research, like that's more significant than these clinical trials where they try and control for everything. Like what worked for this person in this instance based on their situation and everything. And if we had a bunch of those things, deciding what you want to do for someone, if they came in with peripheral artery disease like I had, then this is ideas of what you could do. And it worked really well for this instance. That's much more useful as a practitioner rather than trying to sort through all the clinical trial stuff that they try and control for and prove that this one thing causes this. It'll be much more useful.
Yeah, please do. We'll add it to the database, and I'm excited to have you. We're doing a practice-based research accelerator for people to come in and learn. It's going to be a good time because Nico Kennedy was saying that she was reading research and, that the practitioners would implement the standard of care based on the research and it wouldn't work. And then they'd go back and the research would be like, oh no, well, we controlled for this and this and this. And they're like, well, my patients have all of those variables in their lives. They're like, oh, well, yeah.
Yeah. Like, again, like trying to isolate one thing and from all the different variables doesn't make sense because humans are not exposed to one variable at a time.
Sure are not.
Yeah.
All right. If any of them you'd like to be exposed to any of our variables, Stephen, where can people find you to book a session? Particularly if you are a man or you have a man in your life, it's really worth a consult just to check in on your heart. Because I promise whatever you were told is not the full story.
I mean, my website is resourceyourhealth.com. Pretty much everything is on there. I'm also on social media posting when things pop in my head. I get ideas. I post stuff on there, informational stuff. Just Dr. Stephen Hussey, Dr. Stephen Hussey. People can find me there.
Amazing. So resourceyourhealth.com or Dr. Stephen Hussey on Instagram and all of the big platforms. And you can come and learn if you're a practitioner, you want to take the certification. Dr. Hussey is there for Q&As. And we would love to see you all. Thank you, Stephen. This was so fun. I look forward to interview number 5.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen sooner rather than later.
I think so. There's so much to talk about. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it all. Thank you, Stephen. This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.